All right, I just saw the light go on. Yeah. All right, everyone, good evening. Welcome. It's January 4th, 2022. Happy New Year. This is a meeting of the Goffstown Budget Committee. My name is Joe Alexander. I'm chairman of the committee. We're going to start tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. So I'm going to ask Vice Chair Fred Platt. You can do the roll call for us.
Okay. Stacy Bellimer.
Present.
Lauren Dukas is remote, I understand. Are you there, Lauren?
I don't see her connected yet.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Fred. Present.
Okay. Greg Flegel's excused. Spencer Diaz is excused. Bill Cordes is here.
Present.
Dennis Lynch. Richard Manzo is here.
Present.
I'm present. Evelyn Redmond's here.
Present.
Melanie Renfrew-Hebert's present.
Present.
Skylar Sund,
He's excused.
excused. Richard Fletcher's here. Jared Talbot is here.
School board is present.
Mark LeMay is present.
Present.
And vacant unassigned is not. And the chair is
I'm here. Thank you,
So we
Fred.
have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We have a quorum.
10 in person and 1 remote, so the chair's going to have...
11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
So we have, okay, so 10 in person, 1 remote, so the chair's going to ask that every vote be a roll call vote. So we have to do those. The only votes that I'm planning on having tonight are approval of minutes. But before that, just have to make a quick announcement. The town clerk, Kathy Balls, asked me to notify all members that the 2022 candidate openings for both town and school positions are posted on the website at goffstown.com. Click on election info button on the main page to access information. Current elected officials that are ending their terms will be receiving a letter of notification from the town clerk's office. I invite any member of the public to browse the positions on the website and hopefully put your name forth. But on this committee, the following individuals have terms ending in March 2022. Spencer Diaz, Dennis Lynch, Richard Manzo, and Skylar Sund. So just so everyone knows, those are the terms that are ending in March. So the next thing we're going to do is move into approval of minutes. So we have 3 sets of minutes that were handed to us. You've had them for a while. The committee's had them via email, had time to review them. So I'll start with the November 18 minutes, 2021 minutes, and I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Moved what?
To approve the minutes as presented.
Okay, moved by Jared to approve.
Second.
Seconded by Stacy. Any discussion? All right, Fred, can you call the roll?
Yeah, in a second when I mark down what we're doing.
Thank you, sir.
Stacy Bellimer.
Yes.
Spencer Diaz is excused. Lauren Dukas.
Yes.
Bill Cordes.
Yes.
Richard Manzo.
Yes.
Did I hear yes?
Yes.
Okay. Fred Platt votes yes. Evelyn Redmond.
Yes.
Melanie Renfrew-Hebert.
Yes.
Richard Fletcher.
Yes.
Jared Talbot.
Yes.
Mark LeMay.
Yes.
Okay. They're passed.
Chair votes yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, second set of minutes we had from the November 23rd, 2021 meeting. Is there a motion?
Motion. I'll move to accept the meetings of November 23rd, 2021.
Okay, so a motion from Evelyn to accept November 23rd, 2021 minutes. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Seconded by Melanie. Give Fred a minute. Any discussion?
Okay. Stacy Bellimer.
Yes.
Lauren Dukas.
Yes.
Bill Cordes.
Yes.
Richard Manzo.
Abstain.
I vote yes. Evelyn Redmond.
Yes.
Melanie Renfrew-Hebert.
Yes.
Richard Fletcher.
Yes.
Jared Talbot,
Yes.
Mark Lemay,
Yes.
and Joe Alexander.
Yes.
10 yes, one abstention, no noes.
Perfect. Thank you, Fred. So the last set of minutes we have is from November 30th, 2021. I'll entertain a motion.
I will move
Okay, so Fred moves what?
to approve the minutes of November 30th, 2021.
Second?
Awesome. So moved by Fred to accept, second by Evelyn. Any discussion? All right. You can call the roll when you're ready.
Stacy Bellimer,
Yes.
Spencer, Lauren Dukas,
Yes.
Bill Cordis,
Yes.
Richard Manzo.
Yes.
I vote yes. Evelyn Redmond,
Yes.
Melanie Renfro Hebert,
Yes.
Richard Fletcher,
Yes.
Jared Talbot,
Yes.
Mark Lemay,
Abstain.
and the chair.
Yes.
Ten yes, one abstention.
Perfect. So that motion also passes. So we've approved all the minutes that we can so far. So the next thing on the agenda is the presentation of the SAU teacher contract. So we're going to hear two contracts tonight. The plan is to listen to them, be able to ask questions, and then those will move forward to the public hearing for next week, and we'll make a recommendation after the public hearing next week. So I'm first going to start with the SAU teacher contract. Would both of you like to kick off?
Sure. I did have one housekeeping item, Joe, because you mentioned the deliberative session. So in speaking with Town Hall, the deliberative session for the school is typically held on a Saturday. This year, due to some scheduling conflicts, we're going to be holding it on a Monday night, so it'll be on Monday, February 7th. And then the other conflict that we have is the location. So we ordinarily have it here in the theater. We've also had it in the gym. Unfortunately, well, it's a good thing. Two of our basketball teams are doing pretty well this year. The NHIAA moved up the basketball playoffs up 3 weeks. So there is a very strong likelihood that Goffstown boys and girls team will be playing in a playoff game on Monday, Tuesday, and/or Wednesday of that particular week. And it also happens to be that the following weekend is when they do their musical production. So the parking would just be a nightmare trying to do it here. So we talked about it, we're going to move it to Mountain View Middle School gym. So that'll be on February 7th for the school, and then on Tuesday, February 8th for the town. And as you know, we've got snow dates. So those will be on Wednesday and Thursday respectively. So that's
Thank
big
you. That was the
departure.
plan was to announce that right after, but
Oh, I didn't
thank
know
you.
that.
Jumping the gun. It's all good.
I'm sorry.
It's all good.
All right. So I handed these out. This is the cost per pupil, and this was just done a few days ago. December 28th is when the Department of Education released it. And this provides some context for the teacher contract. That's why I wanted to briefly go over it with you. So as you can see, the state average for elementary schools is a little over $19,330. For middle schools, it's almost $17,263. I rounded up, and then for high school, $17,758. You'll see that I highlighted both Goffstown on page 2 and New Boston on page 3, just so that you see this is the data that I got. I updated the slides that were typically part of presentation so that when we do the deliberative session, this does provide context once again for the budget, but as well as the teacher contract. So for the elementary schools, what you'll see is that Goffstown's per pupil spending is $3,723.92 less than the state average, and that gap has gotten progressively bigger. On page 2 is middle schools. The difference between the state and Goffstown is $3,384.38, and that's about the biggest gap over the last 5 years. And for the high school, the difference is on page 3, $2,386.82. And I wouldn't say it's the biggest gap, but it's a difference. So Goffstown's per pupil at the high school is the 5th lowest of 70 some odd schools. So we'll cover that more in the deliberative session, but I'm sorry, you had a question?
Yeah, Fred.
I do, because this goes through 2021. It does not reflect the contracts we're going to be discussing.
Correct.
I would love to have a 2022 projection with the contracts built in.
Kate's going to kind of cover what we feel are some, projections in terms of what the contract will look like for wages, et cetera. But what the context of this is that the state requires each and every school district in New Hampshire to fill out, and I have 2 copies, I'll pass these around. It's called a DOE 25. And there are 25 pages, that's what they call it, DOE 25. 25 pages of financials. They want to know how much money you spend on salaries at the elementary, middle school level. They want to know what you spend on transportation, food service, grants, you name it. Everything is in here, and I'll pass one down on that side, and I'll pass this one down on the other side. So when you look at this data, from this data right here, where we fall in terms of our cost per pupil, it is all extracted from every school district's DOE 25. And what it demonstrates, in my opinion, is that the Goffstown School District, New Boston too for that matter, are substantially lower than the state average. And I think we get pretty darn good results, so we're getting good value here. But it demonstrates 70% or more of our budget dollars go towards people. That's just indicative of most school districts. And of that, we're trying, and I'll turn it over to Kate soon, but we're trying to make sure that we're competitive in this environment. But as you can see, for the last 15 years, we have been in this similar type of position where we're getting good value for our dollar, but we're in an environment where we have to remain competitive in terms of attracting and retaining people. So I'll turn it over to Kate, but I wanted to at least give you that context.
Fred had a question.
Follow-on question, if we're below, why are we attracting good teachers? Why aren't we losing them to other districts?
Well, Kate will cover some of the reasons there, but I think it'll be best for her to, you might have more questions.
Okay, I have just one holistic question before Kate starts. The education freedom accounts that were just introduced this year took, probably not a lot, but a portion of the population out. How has that affected the per pupil expenditure that we're going to see next year?
I would say what was passed in the last legislative session, negligible.
Negligible.
Negligible, because there was only 21 students who took advantage of it. We don't have precise data as to how many left the school district, because you could have taken advantage of it if you were already a homeschooler.
Yep.
So I do not think, as your business administrator, that it had any significant factor. But then again, I'll say that it had a income restriction,
right?
Which was about $79,000 for a family of 4. If that restriction were to be removed, I don't know what it could then have.
Okay, so the current it's been
negligible
negligible
impact.
Good to know.
Pretty good income.
Thank you. All right, Kate.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening. My name is Kate Mcgrath. I'm the HR director for the school district. Can you all hear me at that end, Richard? Yeah? Okay, super. Thank you. So I'm going to take you through the PowerPoint that was handed out, and we'll just go through it, and I'll pause at each slide to ask if there are questions, so feel free to chime in, and want to make sure you guys have all the information you need as we go through this process.
Yeah, I'm going to let Lauren know.
Yep.
Lauren, I'm going to send you, Kate just emailed it to me, I'm going to send it to you now, the PowerPoint. Okay? So you'll have it? I hope, okay.
Scott, I'm sorry, what was that?
Kate just emailed me the PowerPoint, so I'll send it to you now.
Fantastic, thank you very much.
Okay?
And we're getting some feedback, so just ask that you mute yourself unless you want to speak.
Oh, okay, I will do, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're good. I said.
Go ahead.
Super. So just a reminder of who makes up the Goffstown Education Association. So this is our teaching unit, and there are a total of 265.6 full-time equivalents. So we're not splitting bodies, but we do have some part-time positions, and that's where the .6 comes in. So we have a total of 265.6 full-time equivalents that are covered under the Goffstown Education Association agreement. Within this agreement, you need to think about our elementary classroom teachers, our middle and secondary teachers who have specific content area certifications, so our math teachers, science, English, social studies. It also covers our teachers in specialty areas like computer science, business, art, physical education, as well as things like comprehensive technology. So our graphic design, our woodworking, positions of that nature. It also covers our special education teachers and behavior analysts, our school counselors. You may be more familiar with guidance counselors. The term has been updated over the years. They're now called school counselors, as well as school psychologists, our speech and occupational therapy professionals, as well as our school nurses. So it's quite a broad range of staff who are covered under this agreement. Going to the next slide. So we just want to talk to you a little bit about why a teacher contract is important. And as we enter into the budget process, we're always very cognizant of when we're going to be bringing forth a teacher contract because it is a priority for the district. On the first instance, we need to think about our ability to recruit. And Scott just talked about the cost per pupil, and one of the things that's incredibly important when we're thinking about recruiting is our competitive stance within communities of a geographic similarity and or like size that we compete for our teachers against. So not only on a position by position basis, but we're also finding it harder and harder to attract candidates in critical shortage areas. So recently the state made critical shortage a much broader category where more positions are included in critical shortage lists. However, the ones that remain incredibly difficult to fill are our sciences, our math teachers, all the special education positions, and within special ed we have different categorical areas, things like emotional and behavior disabilities. I think I mentioned math positions, our behavior analysts, and foreign language has also been difficult, although we've had good retention in the last couple of years of our foreign language teachers. But those are the really difficult and challenging positions that we're competing for a very small pool of candidates across the state and into our neighboring southern states. In addition to our ability to recruit folks, it's also important to retain the good teachers that we have. So we think about, as we enter into negotiations, we think about the areas of investing in training and professional development. We spend a significant amount of time making sure that when our staff are hired, they have a good leg to stand on getting into the school district. The contract is also important for staff morale. We see this as a reward for high achievement, and as you've seen and heard from us year over year, we talk about our students' performance against the state averages, and our teachers continue to do a really good job. This is also important for stability for students and families. So when we have teachers who know our students, form those relationships, form the relationships with the families, it just creates stronger foundations. So just a little bit of context for you as we think about the last couple of years in our hiring process. Certainly COVID has introduced challenges that none of us ever anticipated. But in FY20, we had a number of positions that we were unable to fill and had to fill with contracted service providers. Typically, contracted service providers cost much more than it would for us to hire a regular teacher on our staff. So unfilled positions included things like our behavior analyst, speech therapists have been incredibly difficult to find, school psychologists. I mentioned earlier the critical shortage areas like our sciences. We've had challenges with chemistry, physics. And then most recently, some of the challenges have been around computer science areas. So our ability to recruit and retain, once we get those staff on board, becomes more and more critically important each year. Any questions so far? Okay. So the next slide that is there, and I apologize, the charts sometimes can be a little bit of an eyesore as we look at benchmarking data. So one of the places that we start as we're looking into negotiations is seeing where we are positioned against our competing towns. And we use a pretty broad list of competing towns. Again, I mentioned geographically, and it's also important demographically. So looking at districts of similar size and communities that are similar to Goffstown. So our list is pretty big of what we include. You'll see later as we go through what we approached with our wage increases. We focused very specifically on the master's track. So in our teacher's contract, we have salary grids, and that's how our folks know where their pay scale is. And the salary grids are based on educational achievement, so where they are in their degree status and credits, as well as how many years they've been in the profession. So right out of the gate, we were confident that we were doing well in the bachelor's tracks, the bachelors and those who had additional credits, plus 15 and plus 30 credits. But we could see out of the gate that our master's tracks were less than the 50th percentile of where our competing districts were. So that was one area that we definitely spent time focusing on in this contract. What you're looking at here is a chart that projects where we anticipate our proposed contract to be against our competing districts in benchmarking. And you'll see that based on the proposed wage increases, we are getting closer to the 50th percentile, but still not achieving it with the proposed wage increases that we're presenting. We know that Goffstown is never going to be the highest paid. We're never going to be where Amherst and Bedford are going to be. But we do think it's critically important that we're hitting that 50th percentile to really be able to say, look, you're going to come here, you're going to have a good work experience, you're going to have a good work culture, you're going to get a lot of professional development and training, and you're going to be paid a fair competitive wage for that. So that was our starting basis. Any questions on the benchmarking?
Any questions? I have a couple of.
Great.
So the first one, what percentage of teachers have bachelors compared to masters?
Oh, Joe. I think I meant to bring that, and I don't know that I have it in percentages, but I can give it to you out of the 265, where our bachelors fall. Go ahead and ask the second question while I find that.
Okay, and then just a couple benchmark towns.
Sure. So the benchmark towns include Amherst, Bedford, Bow, Concord, Kentucky Valley, Dunbarton, Hollis, Hollis Brookline, Hooksett, Hudson, John Stark, Ware, Litchfield, Merrimack, Manchester, Milford. So
Correct.
geographically, Southern New
Yep,
Hampshire.
correct.
Yep, Southwestern most specifically. Well, I guess we go into the eastern side as well. And let me get back and I will find you that breakdown.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Great.
Okay, super. So moving on to the next slide, and then I'll come back to the where folks fall on the tracks. So the next slide is contract changes financial. So what you'll see for financial changes within the contract, the first area is both a language change that also could have financial change. So right now, or traditionally, all of our teachers have had the same number of contracted days within the contract. It's been 186 days. So you have the 180 school days, and then you have days for professional development. And what we have found recently is that we need to start having some flexibility to negotiate with different staff members to be able to work extra days because their job requires that. So whether it is contracting for summer, whether it's following up and closing out files, there are different reasons why teachers would need additional days. And so the new contract language would allow us to negotiate with staff for additional days beyond the 186. In addition, under the individual contracts and school year article, we've added language that requires staff who resign without permission from the superintendent after July 1st to pay a replacement fee. So this is something that's become an issue in more recent years. Staff have up until July 1st to notify us of a resignation if they intend to leave. But obviously, by then, most of the good candidates are gone. They've secured positions for the upcoming year. And so when a staff member leaves us after July 1st, our ability to recruit and recruit a high-quality candidate becomes more and more challenging as we close in on the school year. It also puts us behind the 8 ball in the preparation of them. So getting teachers solidified for the school year prior to July 1st is always our goal. Also, under financial contract changes, under working conditions, we have added coverage pay for staff who give up a planning period to cover for an absent colleague when a substitute cannot be secured. So we have had difficulty securing substitutes for years. Again, we're competing with our neighboring districts for these high demand individuals. And one of the ways that we really think we're best meeting student needs when a staff member is out is to put another certified teacher in the classroom. And for staff who give up their planning period to cover for another planning period and actually teach during that block of time, they will receive compensation for that.
Any questions? So I have two. What's the replacement fee at?
So the replacement fee has
Does
a
it depend
cap.
on position?
Nope, it's based on the cost to fill, so the cost to replace, so the time, the number of people. So it's not a fixed number, but it does have a cap of $1,000,
Okay.
not to exceed.
And then just to follow up, what's the pay, the sub pay? Is it more? Is it more than what we pay a sub, or is it?
It would be,
Okay.
to fill a full day of coverage.
So
it
if they're
could-
picking up one period a day, they wouldn't get paid the whole day of being a sub.
Correct,
They just get paid like a percentage of that?
correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Great.
And the formula is actually based on Master Step 1.
Okay.
So it's not based on the current sub rate of pay, it's based on a rate within the teacher contract.
Okay. Thank you. Stacy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The language about the resignation before the 7-1, is that common language in contracts in this area? Or do you think that'll be an issue for people to come here when they see that in our contract?
So it is not as common in public sector employment.
Right.
Do I think it will be an issue? We spent a lot of time talking about this because we obviously want the contract to be something that's attractive for individuals to come into. I think hopefully when folks are coming on board, they're not thinking about leaving.
Right.
You know, so they need to be able to give us notice by July 1st. So it's really a respect thing. There is a unwritten rule among superintendents, a collegiality that we try to have conversations with each other before we'll interview a candidate past July 1st. So I think what we have tried to really do is reinstate that agreement that has been kind of the handshake for a long time and put some meat behind it so that our staff know, look, if you're going to look after July 1st, you need to have a conversation with the superintendent to do so. So it's not that you can't, but we need to be able to have the ability that if it's a computer science teacher, we need to start looking at that point in July as opposed to when we get the notice in August.
Right, okay.
So if I may, Lauren, I just want to provide context, not just for you, but for this
Stacy.
group and for people on GTV.
Yep.
Contracts to teachers, quote me on that, April,
Yep.
right?
Yes.
So we provide notice of employment for the following school year in April. We ask them to sign that contract and return it to us by what time, what date?
April 15th.
April 15th. So we're talking about people who have signed a contract that they are going to work with the school district, okay?
Yep.
And then they decide to then leave. So we're talking about people who have signed a contract, and then they look after that date. Now, we all know that happens for promotions and things like that, but what we're seeing is a trend where these are laterals. And that's why this language, was put in. But I want folks to know is that this is not a situation where, in most places, you don't sign a contract, but for teachers, they're signing an employment contract for a year.
Right.
And they're kind of agreeing, and now we're talking about them saying, nope, I want to walk away from this contract.
Just,
Right, go ahead.
Yeah.
I just want to say, I think this is fantastic
Yeah.
language. I'm wondering, when we're already talking about issues with finding applicants, if this is something that we think may cause people not to come
And I don't
apply to
think it will,
Goffstown.
but I think it's fair for the employer in this situation.
Do you have any
Because-
comparable towns that have done this, where they haven't seen?
I
Okay.
think we're kind of leading the charge on
Okay.
this. So I will also say, I don't know how closely folks pull out the master agreement as they're looking. They'll look at the salary scale. I think that's the big thing that they often look at. But when it gets into the nitty-gritties of the language, of a 30-page document, I find that most current employees need guidance on, pointing to different areas of the language. So I really don't see this as an impediment to the hiring process. Great
you.
question, though.
Okay, Fred?
What is our turnover rate percentage, and how does that compare with your benchmark towns?
So Fred, the benchmark turnover rate is not available for our towns that we compete with, but ours for the last 2 years has hovered around 10 or 11% for our teaching staff.
Yeah.
So we've lost just shy of about 30 teachers per year.
Do we do, exit interviews?
We do.
So can you tell me, the biggest reasons why teachers are leaving?
Yeah, so I think probably the last year, a third of our staff retired, a third of the 10% that
Some
left.
excuse.
Sorry?
Some excuse. Okay.
The year prior, we definitely had resignations due to COVID, so people were nervous about being in the classroom. I think that there are always a small portion who leave for personal reasons, whether it's relocation, moving closer to home, finding a job closer to home, medical, things like that. And then you have, probably about 30 to 40% that it's job fit, that it's wages, that it's just perception about an opportunity within another district.
Okay, thank you.
And I do have the number on the tracks.
Oh, great.
Hold on.
Okay.
That's the latest from 12/16 from the state.
So this is,
Teachers only.
okay, so Scott just pulled up a state comparison of where
Goffstown's in there.
teachers fall on tracks.
Yep.
So this was for 21-22, and so are those that fall into the bachelors. Scott didn't get me to Goffstown.
It's that, it's scroll down.
So 40 out of our two, so this number is a little bit skewed because the state has different requirements when they do their teacher reporting. So they'll exclude certain categories of teachers. So I just explained that we have all these individuals, nurses, school psychologists, right? So this number is a little bit skewed. This has 40 out of our 224 at bachelors. I've got 97 out of our 265 at
97
bachelors.
are at bachelor's?
Yes.
And then what's the rest are at master's?
Yep, masters are above. Thank you.
So about
A little less
Okay.
than a third.
okay.
And I think in terms of the game plan though, Joe and others, is that when you look at, the state, we're trying to recognize the teachers at that master's level. And I think, right, anecdotally, when we do hire teachers with a master's or coming from a master's program, we hear pretty favorable findings in terms of their success.
Yes, so I'm going to talk about
Yeah,
that a little
okay.
bit more when we get into the wages.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions?
Okay, super. So continuing on the financial changes, so currently, under professional compensation, what is proposed is, right now, we have the ability to give an individual who is coming from an industry job, a non-teaching job, up to 50% credit for their years of experience. So for example, we recently hired a chemist from Stonyfield Farms, right? They work in the yogurt industry, but their chemistry experience is significant. Right now, under the current language, we can only give them 50% of their experience under the current contract. So if I'm a 4-year employee at Stonyfield as a chemist, I can only get 2 years of credit on my pay scale. This contract proposes that we can give them full year-for-year credit. And again, especially in these critical shortage areas, this is a significant need in terms of our ability to hire, think outside of the box, recruit people from different industries, not necessarily just teaching staff, and being able to give them the full experience for their work is going to be a significant help in that area. In addition, under professional compensation, the superintendent has the discretion to issue a sign-on bonus up to $1,000 for critical shortage area hires. So we don't anticipate that this would be something that would be given out to every hire. We would anticipate that this would be used as minimally as possible when we are close but not getting to the spot that we need to be able to push somebody over the edge to accept our position. And then lastly, under that financial professional compensation language section, currently, right now, if the Goffstown High School teachers teach an extra section beyond what their colleagues teach, their regular sections, they get paid a % to take on that extra class. So right now, I mentioned that we have unfilled science positions as an example. So our current staff picked up the caseload for those unfilled positions, and they get paid basically a percentage of the salary to take on that additional class caseload. Going forward, Mountain View teachers would also be eligible for that if we have unfilled positions in those areas and they take on an extra section of students. Under professional development, we have added a proposed money for critical shortage area endorsements with payback provisions. So what that means is, right now, teachers can take classes, they can continue their professional development, and there's an allotment of money for them to do that. What we wanted was an extra amount of money that we would be able to talk to individuals about to say, we really need a teacher to pick up an additional endorsement, let's say in biology. Maybe they're already a chemistry teacher. And in order to do that, they have to invest in classes to make them certified for that. And we want to be able to give them additional professional development money above and beyond what they're eligible for, so that we can have the certifications needed to teach our students. Questions on that?
Go ahead, Jared.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just, you have this notion in here, payback provisions outlined above.
Sorry, I moved slides around. So
What does
there's
that
another
mean?
payback section in the professional development that I'm going to talk about on the language
Okay,
changes.
I will withdraw my question.
Thank you. My apologies.
The sign-on bonus, do they get that after a certain amount of time spent in
They
the
do.
district?
They do. Yep.
Okay, and
So,
what's the time?
I'll pull up the language. I believe the first, so it's going to be paid in 2 installments. The
Right.
first one was October, and the second one, I believe, was at the end of their first
The end
year.
of the first year.
Okay.
So it's the second pay period within October that they would receive it, and then after they renew their contract to teach that second year, that first paycheck of that second year is when they would get that money, the rest of their bonus.
So if they didn't renew, they wouldn't get the second part of the sign-on bonus? So the
Correct.
sign-on bonus is provided that they serve at least 2 years?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thank you.
Jared.
all right.
Great. Okay, so wage increases. So again, the compensation where we started was focusing on the competitive benchmarking at the 50th percentile. So what we have proposed is in years 1, 2, and 3, staff would get their step for their year of service plus the grid adjustment. And the grid adjustments that are being proposed are different for the bachelor's and master's tracks. So in year 1, we're proposing that the bachelor's tracks increase by 2%, in year 2 by 1.5%, and in year 3 by 1%. Again, focusing on the master's tracks for 2 reasons. One, because they're currently below the 50th percentile when we look at the benchmarking. And then what Scott was starting to allude to is one of the things that we've really seen through the education prep programs, so not all college prep programs are created equally, but there are programs where teachers will come out certified with their master's degree. And there are programs that teachers will come out certified with their bachelor's degree. And we have found, anecdotally, by and large, that those teachers who go through the programs that come out with their master's degrees are better qualified and more prepared to do the job. So for those two reasons, we really focused on the master's track in this agreement.
I'm wondering about student outcome though. So is there like a clear, clear increased performance if a student's in a class with a master's teacher compared to a student in a class with a bachelor's teacher?
I do not have the student performance data tied to teachers at that level.
I'd just be curious to see that, because
It
it looks,
would
I
be
mean,
good.
we're looking at 6%
Yes.
for 3 years straight,
4% for the master's tracks.
including the step,
Correct.
so 6%.
Yeah, so, again, I certainly have not done any analysis on this. It's just not something I would do. But if you were to go onto the Department of Education website, so I pulled that attainment of bachelor's and master's and beyond master's off of the same exact website, you'll see, when you take a look at communities that have, I guess, stronger student outcomes, and then you look at those same communities, then I'll use say Bedford, as an example, or Amherst, you're gonna see that they're at like 75% masters, 70, 80% masters. So you're gonna see more of that. Now granted, there are socioeconomic reasons why there's student attainment, et cetera, but other than any type of academic research, which I don't know of, maybe somebody in the SAU would, but when you look at just comparing towns that have high master's attainment with those same towns also have very high student achievement.
Thank you, Scott. I also want to just take us back to the prior contract, Joe, or the current contract that we're in. So I think that it's important to recognize the increases that folks got this go around. So the wage increases were 1.75, 1.5, and 1.75 per year over these, over the current contract.
Including the step?
Plus step. So
The
step is.
was at 2.
Step is 3%.
So the last 3 years, they got roughly 4%.
Yep,
And
4.5.
we're increasing that to 6% with this contract.
So the 6%
For
that you see
masters.
on here is the average increase, because those who are at top step do not get step. So they're only getting the grid adjustment. And right now, we have a third of our staff at top step. So those folks, and that's consistent with the current contract, it tends to be about a third that are on the top step, only get the 1.75, 1.5, et cetera. I think that it's really important to recognize that continuing to do grid increases that are smaller is going to continue to put us behind in the benchmarking. So again, we're already behind in the master's track at the 50th percentile. So we're not even talking about trying to get to the 60th, 75th. We're just talking about the 50th. And without making a larger grid movement, that would be the result, is falling further behind.
Okay, and one more, do we know what the increase is to go from a 4% to a 6% pay increase? Like what that dollar amount is?
If we were to have made a track change, if we were to have adjusted the grid 6% instead of 4%?
No, I'm sorry, the 4% compared to the 1.7, like how much more is that? This contract compared to the last contract?
Okay, yes, I do.
Does my question make sense?
So I think that's a little bit of a different question, but I do, the next slide will cover the
Okay.
costs, and I do have how that compares to last year's contract,
Great,
or this 3-year contract.
thank you.
Sure.
Fred?
I understand you benchmark for surrounding towns in the southeast area, their school systems. Do you benchmark for totally different positions, like engineers and accountants and so on? see where the school teacher's salary falls in line with several other professions?
So this is a conversation that Scott and I have quite frequently. So it's not a formal process as part of the teacher negotiations, Fred. But, I think two things. When we look at things like creating a formula to do contracts that have extra days, we are mindful of the fact that what this is not a full year contract and a full year salary. When we compare it to an accountant or an engineer and we try to look at it, we do pay attention to how that would be annualized out in the ballpark.
Understood, but it's still, to me, a worthwhile exercise to say it ought to be an X percent of some of those other positions, recognizing it's part-time, not full-time, but so make sure that you're not going ahead of or slipping behind a percentage of some of the other positions, that's all.
I would say that we are definitely not going ahead of private industry, engineers, chemists, physicists.
Last a year or so, I believe
accountants.
that, because wages everywhere are going nuts.
Yes. Yes.
Stacy?
I'm actually going to disagree with that statement because I work for the state and we don't see increases like this. So I'm actually amazed that they're getting bumps again. So I guess my question is, were you chasing the 50% last year with all those raises, and then we're chasing the 50% again? And when does that?
Last contract meeting.
So when does that? Are we always? That's a lot of money to get raises last year, and then a lot of money to get raises again this year. So I'm completely caught off guard. So again, next year we're going to be looking to chase for this 50 to get the 50% again. Correct?
But this is the free market, and and I'm sure you're going to hear this when we deal with the town. So you're trying to compete for teacher talent or for any, whether it be speech pathology, etc. We've clearly seen that we're struggling in all these specialty areas because the private sector is offering way more than we can even come close to. But what we're seeing is the internal pressures of surrounding school districts, and you'll hear the same exact story when we talk with the town, where you have municipalities like Manchester, Merrimack, Londonderry, others. If they are paying $10,000 more for a firefighter or a police officer or a teacher, and it's a 15-minute drive that's different, we are seeing our people leave to go to other districts. So then I totally get where you're coming from, and people always say, well, it's the public sector, et cetera, but we're still dealing in a free market economy where we're having a much more difficult time trying to attract and retain the talent that we have, and you can see, and that's kind of the reason why I led off with this data, is that the record clearly shows that Goffstown and New Boston, for that matter, are well below the state average in terms of per pupil spending. What I passed around to you is all of it, is where every single penny goes, and you'll see a majority of it is salary. So places like Londonderry, Merrimack, they're paying, this is what they're paying. So either, no one wants to say you got to keep up with the Joneses, but you got to be relevant, and I think, so we're not shooting to be in the 75th percentile, we're just trying to be at the 50th. And in order to do that, this contract is one that is trying to get us there, and I think Kate's going to show you that we're projecting that even with 2 or 3% increases that other communities might pay, we're still going to probably be lagging. So we're always going to be chasing that rabbit, shall we say? But it's a tough situation, and I might stick around for the next presentation, but I'm sure I'm going to hear this. I've sat on the other side, on the town side, and it's the same story. It's no different.
Have we, do we know any data of the per pupil expenditure versus student outcome? Is it well documented that the more you spend on the child, the better the outcome, or is that data inconsistent?
That data, there has been studies done on that. I don't have specificity on that, but there is not a direct correlation between the money that you spend and the student outcome. So the more you spend doesn't mean you're going to get necessarily better results. That I think if you take a look at those charts, I think I call it the value gap, but I think we get value here in Goffstown. I think we get tremendous value in New Boston as well. We spend less per pupil, and our educational outcomes are at least at the state average, and if not better. So I think that speaks to it. So again, it's not,
Right.
but I do know that there are academics who have studied that, and that there is not what the correlation is, and Brian has shared this with us numerous times, is the socioeconomic of the community and the educational attainment of the mother and the family. You know, those are the most predictive in terms of educational outcomes.
Okay. If more to add, I'll save it. Anybody else? Okay.
What's the turnover rate, say, for the last year?
Last year, it was 11% for our teaching staff.
Yes, that's horrible.
Just about 30 staff members left.
Kate, was that across the whole district?
In Goffstown?
Yeah.
Just teachers.
Right.
Yeah.
But across all the schools?
Yes, yes.
Go ahead, Kate.
Thank you. So those were the adjustments to the grids that we just talked about. We are also asking for an additional $40,000 to be put towards finalizing our co-curricular positions.
What?
Our co-curricular positions.
And if I can comment on that, Mr. Chair. As everybody recalls, we talked about co-curriculars and money going towards the theater, money going towards Congress, non-athletics. This is an opportunity where we're putting more money into those stipends that we would pay for teachers taking and being those mentors. So I know that this, when we had our discussions, we talked about this is just the start, it's not the finish, but this contract does put specific amount more into the extracurricular stipends and extracurricular activities that we presented earlier in this fiscal budget round. So I want to make sure people understood that. I think Mr. Manzo is really one of the people that spoke up about that, is we don't sometimes put enough in there. This is acknowledging that we don't put enough, and we're continuing to make efforts on that side.
Thank you, Jared. So just to add a little bit more context to the co-curriculars, we do have a little over 100 positions right now that are currently active. There are an additional 45 that happen without any compensation. So Mr. Talbot just mentioned a couple that have recently been funded. FBLA, Future Business Leaders of America, is a great example of a co-curricular that has been ongoing for many, many years, and the teacher has never received any compensation for it. So we are looking to continue the work that started with this current contract, evaluating all of those individuals' positions that add value, that keep our kids here, that keep our kids after school engaged, doing productive things, and to provide a small stipend to them for that important work. In addition to the co-curricular ask, I mentioned earlier the critical shortage professional development, and that is the $5,000 that we're seeking in that area. Good to move on?
Good, move on.
Okay. So the next slide shows you the costing for the contract. So we are proposing a 4-year agreement with the teachers. And comparatively, so Joe, you asked me what the 4% to the master's track compares. So our year 1 costing is just over $1 million, $1,100,000. Last year, the 1.75% was just shy of $742,000 in year 1 cost. So the 4-year outline is there. You can see that outlined by year with a total sum over the course of the 4 years.
So I also want to add that decisions that were made during the budgeting process, decisions that are being made by the school board in terms of operations and how we do things, I think there's a recognition that our teachers and our staff are the most important assets in the school district, and you'll hear the same thing. I mean, our staff at the town, they're the most important piece of the town operations. And where where we look to do a better job is being more efficient with our non-salary type dollars. So being as aggressive as we can, like we had fantastic, this year we didn't, but in the past we've had really good, say, propane, right? And we've done that. So trying to look for ways to save money. We're looking at our IT spend right now, and how can we save money on in the areas of IT, again, so that we can repurpose some of those funds or those types of savings and put that into what we feel is much more valuable in terms of student engagement and student attainment, and that's our teachers and our support staff. So when you took a look at your budget, it was a pretty lean budget, but it was done so with the purpose of, we knew that our teachers are critically important, and we wanted to devote any funds there, knowing that we were kind of behind in terms of other communities. So that's the method in terms of the rationale for why we did what we did. I know that, I mean, Kate and I, and well, Jared too, we talk all the time, is that we're trying to look to be very judicious in our non-salary type spending, because the most important things are your people. And that's kind of been the approach that since I've been here, and it's hopefully will continue.
Is there a reason why we're paying 4% for union, and then like 2% or 2.5% for non-union, right? So the increases are different. So is there? I mean, I understand you're chasing the 50%, but how does the non-union compare to the statewide average percentile compared to the union average? I guess that's why I'm wondering why we're increasing 6% compared to 2% or 3%.
So when you've got your biggest population, 265 out of our 450-ish employees, right? What you're looking at is very different. When we're hiring one-offs, principals, assistant principals, some of our more specialized positions, our technology, it's a much smaller group of individuals, and typically we're able to benchmark and hire based on where they are in their skill set. It's less constrained, for lack of a better word, to a contract that holds us where a contract holds us. So I think that we're very cognizant of what's happening with everybody's wage increases, geographically in the Northeast, in the state, when we're doing our non-union increases. And we are benchmarking those positions on a very regular basis. Those positions also are sometimes niche positions that don't exist for benchmarking. So school districts operate differently. Some have social workers, others don't, right? So it's also a little bit more challenging to look apples to apples like we can with a teacher contract to some of those other non-union positions.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. Good.
Okay.
Evelyn, did you have something?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Kate, I'm looking at this grid, and these are proposed. So you've got proposed retirement contribution increases for the proposed grid increases. Now, these are all close to $1 million each year without any other changes in your proposed budget. I mean, what do we propose now this year is $48 million for the whole district?
I think that's what we.
In terms of the total budget?
Right.
So Evelyn, just to be clear, the retirement and FICA increases that are shown on that chart are applicable to the proposed increases only.
Right.
So those are fixed costs. You may recall, when we costed out our prior contract, teacher retirement was only at 17% and change. And we had this significant increase from the New Hampshire retirement system at the state level. So those are for those proposed increases, what we would also incur for those fixed costs. Those are not additional proposed costs, if I understood your question correctly.
If I could, Evelyn, I think that you made a really good point, and I want to go back to what Fred said 3 or 4 meetings ago. And that is, what we have here is the current employees, assuming that the same group of employees is going to be with us for the next 4 years, okay? We have taken a look at what was projected for the last state contract and what was actual reality. Fred mentioned it 4 or 5 meetings ago, and I think we called it teacher turnover money. So in year 1, we have all these people, but we may have 10 teachers retire at the end of this year, who then get replaced by teachers who they might not make half as much, but they might make 2/3. Fred, you mentioned that. So what you're seeing here are, I would consider the worst, not the worst case scenario, but it kind of is, it's the maximum, because more often than not, what we have seen over many, many, many years is that every year you have a certain staff turnover, and the teacher who might have been at the top step is replaced with a teacher, say with 5 years experience, say on average, and so you never really get to that 1,022,000 and change. It might be 912,000 and change, and that's kind of historic. So it kind of alludes to what Fred was talking about, and that's why we have to project and budget worst case, but recognizing that at the end of the year, when you look at like the form I sent out, your unassigned fund balance, whatever is unspent goes back to reduced taxes the following year. So you budget worst case, but then you end up returning it, the following year, type of thing.
Good to move forward with the language changes? Okay. So I will go through these briefly. So right now, we had a couple of cleanup items under the titles that are covered by the agreement. I mentioned guidance counselors are now school counselors as an example. So it's just updating the actual titles to fit the positions. Under vacancies and promotions, right now, we're still required to post our positions in hard copy. Right now, with COVID, buildings are not open, so external people cannot come into our buildings. It also is manpower, so every time we have to make copies and send them out to the buildings, it is archaic. So we are moving to just our online job board for our job postings. Under working conditions, we added planning time for Bartlett and Maple to the contract. So effective on 7/1/24, employees in those 2 buildings will receive a 4th unencumbered planning period. They currently have 3. Under professional compensation, these are just language changes. Right now, our teachers can choose to be paid in 22 or 26 pays. It's a little bit of an administrative challenge to manage all of the contracts, all 265 contracts that come back, and whether they circled I want 22 or I want 26, making sure that it's accurate in the pay system. The teachers have agreed to eliminate the 22 pay option, so this is a great administrative burden reduction for us. We've also added language about a teacher mentor program. So this is something that in buildings has been done informally, but starting hopefully with next year, we will have a more formal program across the buildings that will likely be a 2-year program to really make sure our teachers are partnered with a mentor who can really set them up for success and just be their day-to-day person to go to. Additional language changes under professional development. So this was what I was referring to earlier. I separated out the contract changes between language and financial. So previously, this first bullet, we added tuition payback for those resigning after 7/1 without approval to pay back 50% of those fees received. So again, we spend a significant amount of time investing in our teachers to make sure that they are set up for success, that they're getting the professional development and support that they need. And if folks do not let us know by that contract deadline, they're subject to a payback provision on those tuition reimbursements. Under insurance, we did some cleanup. The teachers currently have a Section 125 plan, so that's just a pre-tax account that they can set aside for out-of-pocket expenses for medical or dependent care. And so we just added the language reflecting that they have that account. And we did increase the current health spending cap that they can contribute, no contribution from the district, just what they're allowed to put in to the IRS maximum amount. That also helps the district because it reduces our FICA taxes associated on those contributions. And then under leaves, we added language to allow the district to accrue time in hours or days. So again, this is an administrative benefit for the processing of leave time for our staff. And as I mentioned earlier, it is a proposed 4-year agreement.
Does anyone have any questions for Kate? Final questions? My last question is on the vacancies postings. Is that a violation of an RSA? Or, I have to look at the RSA, but like, isn't any time a public or tax, like any position that is funded by the
notice?
taxpayers, there needs to be a public notice requirement in writing somewhere
Not aware
for a
of-
job posting?
Well, it's
I have to
still
look
in
at
writing.
91A, but.
Yeah, it's still in writing, but it's not like on a bulletin board. It's still in writing, but as long as it's accessible and all of our folks have access to,
Well, not everyone has access to the internet, so.
they
or-
do in our
or-
buildings, because we have if employees don't have their own device, our teachers have devices, but they have access, there are kiosks and there are access, even our custodians have.
Well,
Are
I'm
you
asking,
asking
I'm
more
even
from a
asking
public?
just public,
Oh.
they're
Non-employee.
non-employees.
non-employee.
Does this restrict the ability of a non-employee to come and actually look at the positions that are posted if they don't have access to the internet?
That's a good question.
I would just relook at the RSA, because I don't
Sure.
know if that
Yeah.
Okay.
is even allowed. If
The
we've given
library
permission
has
for that.
computers with,
It's not a school
I
day.
can comment that, but it's a public facility that has public access to the internet. So it's not, they're not restricted to being a resident or even a member of the library.
Right, okay. Okay,
Thank you.
yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Stop.
everybody. I appreciate your time.
So, like I said, next week the committee will have discussion and make a recommendation on this after the public hearing. So the final thing on our agenda is the, what?
I just point one thing out, let's keep going.
Okay, the final thing on the agenda is the IAFF Goffstown fire contract. So, Eric, I don't know if Chief wanted to come up, whoever. Okay. Got it.
So do we have a handout?
I didn't pass it on earlier because I didn't want him to get buried. That's for-
Oh, you want to keep this for reading? It's really good to be insomnia.
I don't have insomnia.
Do you have 3 copies there? Because
No, we just have to, we do. Here we go.
I think you have 3 there, Evelyn.
I'm not entirely sure.
sorry.
It's a good question to ask.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If there's anybody else who'd like a copy, and I don't know what from the public here, but have some extras with us.
Have we sent this to Lauren as well?
We have not, but we,
I'm gonna do it right now.
Thank you.
so the, a bit of background on this group. The professional firefighters of Goffstown are the full-time regular firefighters and full-time regular lieutenants at our fire stations. This is made up of 25 covered positions. The department is currently running with 24 shift personnel. They run 4 shifts of 6 out of both stations, and 1 fire inspection officer. To give you a little bit of context of what occurred during our last CBA, the last CBA was a 3-year CBA that was approved by the voters in 2019. During that contract, the union in town moved to 24/7 coverage. Prior to this, we had 12 shift personnel. This was before a SAFER grant came in. We had 12 shift personnel that worked from, I believe, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, and then call force and part-time force in the overnight. In December of 2019, the union in town did a trial period of 6 months to try out 24/7, and in June of 2020, the select board adopted a 24/7 schedule. It remains a mix of full-time, part-time, and call force. COVID has reduced the number of part-time and call force that is willing to work for the department, but they are still active members of the department. Also during this period, we had, the town was successful with 2 separate FEMA SAFER grants. 2019, which has 1 year remaining on it. The final year, the town is responsible for 65% of those 4 firefighters. And the one that was just approved this past March in 2021, which is 3 years of 100% of 4 firefighters. During this past contract, we've had significant turnover amongst our membership due to higher wages at area departments. Until August of this year, we only had 17 members, or I guess 17 covered positions in this union. In August, 4 members were added, full-time members were added by shifting some funds from the part-time wages, and then the SAFER grant came into effect in November. So we only had 17 members from that 2019 grant, and we've had 9 members leave during this contract to go to area departments. Add in a couple of retirements, add in at least 1 member that left for different career. You know, we've lost a significant amount, and what we're seeing in our exit interviews is a lot of these members are going to area agencies for higher wages. They're seeing that bump in those initial first 18 months, and that's why we feel that we're losing a lot of people.
So Derek, that's like 40%.
Yes.
That's correct.
That's 40% of the department left because of wages
Correct.
only? Is there
There's
anything
been
else?
a
I mean,
variety.
like,
There's been a
you know,
variety
we
of
got
reasons.
10% of teachers leaving because of wages, and now we have 40% of firefighters leaving because of wages. Doesn't add up completely.
It's not all wages. There are some people that have a dream agency. There are some people that say, I want to be in the Nashua Fire Agency for this reason. So there are some of those, but every exit interview, even those that say you pay a fair wage, they say, we're going to another department, and within the 6-month bump and then the 12-month bump, I'm going to be right where I am right now. It's no loss of wages. So even those lateral transfers where people that are getting into their dream department, they're seeing that at a minimum, they're going to make the same amount. When you look at Merrimack, where you see what Londonderry, some of the other area agencies that we're competing against, it's a significant increase that they're going to have in those first few years.
Okay.
That's been a problem for the last 30 years. The turnover rate. I know 1 year I had 4 of them leave from Manchester for wages.
So for contract changes, the biggest item that we had to tackle with this contract was to address the shift change to a 24/7 schedule and all the different parts of that contract that it touches. Your use of leave, the use of vacation leave, all those items were addressed in the contract changes. Insurance, we maintained our current employer-employee match. However, we did follow suit of what we've done with the patrol, the dispatch unions, as well as non-unions, where we changed language to try and make our higher deductible plan a little bit more attractive to those younger, healthier employees, much of which this union is, to try and see if they'll go over to the higher deductible plan. Also, we were able to address longevity, which had historically started after 8 years. Any new employees coming in under this contract, longevity won't occur until they've been with the department for 20 years. And then we also refined some leave language for military leave, FMLA, and jury duty.
Go ahead, Fred.
You just talked about longevity. That meant nothing to me. What do you mean by 8 years and 20 years? What happens?
So historically, the town had a 9-step matrix.
Okay.
You'd get a step increase after you completed your probationary, and then you'd get a step increase every year thereafter that the budget passed. When you got to year 8 and 9 of your career, you were at the top of your matrix. You would get cost of living if those were approved. Otherwise, your only other increase would be longevity that's issued in November for those employees that have been here for 8 years or more. In, I believe, 2015, non-union were switched. Those were grandfathered in, maintained on the old longevity plan. New employees that came in started at year 20. We've rolled those out to all the other contracts. This was the last contract that, to match all those other groups that we've added that language in. Does that answer your question?
I think so.
Wages, on the next page, we developed a 10-step matrix. We looked at Southern New Hampshire fire agencies that we are commonly competing against. We did not include the cities of Concord, Manchester, or Nashua, but we did focus on those area towns and those in the southern, and then also a couple out towards the seacoast that have some similar characteristics to us, college towns, some of those as well. We created a wage matrix for a new classification, which is a master firefighter. This might be somebody that is been a firefighter for many years, has mastered their discipline, and is ready, either not ready to move to that lieutenant position, or as we have a pretty young department right now, there may not be a lieutenant slot that's open for them. And we do not want to lose these members that are valuable members of the department to go to a lateral transfer to another department, where many do have that master firefighter. So we've created this new wage matrix for master firefighter. In year 1, you can see here, members will be placed on the new wage matrix based on years in grade. No members are slotted for that master firefighter at this time. That would require a job description approved by the select board, but and a probationary firefighter coming in brand new would be start off at $22 an hour. Currently, they're coming in at $20.30. Many of the other towns that we're seeing are starting them right around $22 to $23 an hour. And the thing that we're competing against is a lot of those communities are giving a 6-month bump, a 12-month bump, an 18-month bump. They're doing a lot of those things. So what we've done is a probationary firefighter, once they complete probation, they're placed on that 10-step matrix, and then they can move forward. In year 2,
Second, go ahead, Fred.
I just think I heard you. I want to repeat what I heard you say and see if it's correct. Master firefighter is new to us, but it's not new to people around, towns around us?
correct.
Okay.
Yes, Town of Merrimack has that. Many of the others have master firefighters as well. And typically, it requires certain level of training, certain certifications through the state of New Hampshire and other recognized organizations. So
Richard.
How long are they on probationary?
they are a 12-month probationary, minimum. So in year 2, there's no matrix adjustment, and it would be a step increase. Those steps go from anywhere from 4% down to 1%. It averages out to 1.7% matrix. Again, we're following the model that many of the other southern New Hampshire communities are following, where those brand new firefighters coming in, getting all that training, are seeing 4%, 3% increases, but the more seasoned ones are seeing smaller increases. So the average is about 1.7% across all the different positions. And then in year 3, the matrix, the entire matrix would shift by 2%, and those eligible would receive a step increase as well. The purpose of this is a 3-year contract. The purposes of this is to remain competitive so that we're not in the same place that we are right now, where we're chasing the market, but hopefully we stay competitive with the market.
Derek, do you have a clause in this contract that if they leave within a certain period, they have to repay training expenses?
They have to repay training expenses if they have done college credits, any non-required certifications, or if they take advantage of our paramedic training. We do not have a training clause for any of the other firefighter trainings that they might receive, any of the required trainings. So on your final page, ballot cost calculations. Again, this is for 25 covered positions. Did I skip a page?
No.
No, I just went through it really quick. So our ballot cost calculations is it's 25 covered positions. Our wage increases are calculated. This group works 2,184 scheduled hours during a year. If you look at that on an 8-hour day, you're talking 273 days a year. Again, they work it in a 24-hour shift, so it's a little bit different, but they are working the most hours scheduled of any town employee. We have to add in Medicare and Group 2 Fire. The current New Hampshire retirement system employer contribution is just under 33%. So you see there is a significant cost to that retirement. And you'll see those wage increases in 2022, 2023, and 2024, again, across those 25 covered positions, based on the current personnel and based on where they'd be placed on the matrix. And then just your final page is simply the language we would use, which is directed by NHDRA.
Stacy.
I think this is more of a question for Chief, actually. So would there then be a plan to promote some people to this master firefighter position, or is this only for new people hired into this position?
So the initial plan that we have thought of so far is once the town vote is done, there would be a committee much like the 24/7 committee, kind of get together with town administrator, a select board representative, union representative, and administration to finalize the requirements for the master firefighter, get a job description written and approved by the select board, and then there would be people that may or may not be qualified, or at least they would have a roadmap to know what qualifications they would need to get.
Okay, follow up. Thank you, Michelle. Do you have an idea of how many you would want employed? I would imagine, right, you want like a certain number of each position, correct? Does that also apply for the master firefighter position?
So there's no language in the contract that would limit the number of master firefighters. It would simply be, we would have to determine what those minimum qualifications are, and should they meet those and maintain those necessary certifications and education, then they would receive that, they'd be eligible to remain on that wage matrix.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions for Derek or Brian? Okay, great, thank you. So that concludes our official things on the agenda. So I'm just going to remind the committee and the public that our next meeting's going to be Tuesday, January 11th, 2022, in the high school auditorium at 7 o'clock. That meeting is going to be the Budget Committee public hearing. We invite the public to come and speak for or against any article. And then after, we're going to make recommendations after that meeting. Monday, February 7th, as Scott alluded to, that is our school district deliberative session. The snow date is going to be the 9th, but it's in the Mountain View Middle School gymnasium. So note that the location's changed from the original So it's going to be followed by a brief regular meeting of the Budget Committee to reconsider recommendations for any articles that may have had appropriation changes during deliberative session. And then Tuesday, February 8th is town deliberative session. The snow date is the 10th, and it's at, again, the Mountain View Middle School Gymnasium, and it's followed by a brief regular meeting of the Budget Committee. Is there anything else the committee would like to bring up, new business-wise? Jared?
Mr. Chair, I don't recall, so have we had the town budget, the default budget presented to us at this point in time, or is that something that we still need to review?
So the default budget is determined by the governing body. We will be bringing that number to the governing body, the select board, on Monday, the 10th. So we will have that information for the public hearing, but they have not finalized their default budget or voted on their default budget yet.
And
So-
the default budget, we don't have any say over, because that's the,
Correct, but I would say as an individual, I always look at the proposed budget against the default budget to kind of make those determinations, but we're not expecting to receive the information for the default budget until the public hearing.
I'm sure that we can send it out by email as soon as the select board, so the budget committee members will have it as far, again, I apologize, but yeah, once the select board approves that, we can send that information out.
Great, thank you.
yes, please do that. Great. Anything else for new business? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved to adjourn.
Okay, moved by Fred,
Second?
second by Evelyn. We don't need a roll call from this, so discussion? No? Okay, this committee's adjourned. Thank you.